Get connected with Take Two Radio on Facebook or Twitter at Take Two Radio. For email updates on future shows, follow at Blog Talk Radio. For previous episodes, upcoming guests, and more, visit take2radio.com.
Hi, this is Dave Roundtree, co-author of the soon-to-be-released Demon Street USA, author of Paranormal Technology, an all-around science geek in the paranormal. And when I'm not doing anything, I sit around and chuckle to the antics of the Malliard Report.
The opinions expressed on the Malliard Report are those of the host and participants and are not intended to and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of any simulcasting radio network or sponsor. All listeners are advised to make their own decisions.
It's the Malliard Report, yeah, the Malliard Report, the paranormal talk radio show with Jim Malliard as your host. See what lies beneath any paranormal activity. Go inside a world that others don't want to see. It's the Malliard Report, yeah, the Malliard Report. I want to welcome everybody to tonight's Malliard Report. Before I get too far, I want to mention Spectrum Light, the best IR boosters available. Significant light illumination gains made with Sony infrared cameras. Visit SpectrumState.com or follow them on Twitter at AU Paranormal on Twitter there. Or follow me and then you'll see some tweets by them because I'm always tweeting at them or around them just because I like doing that to them since they were kind enough to be part of the program. My guest tonight is Louisa Oakley Green, the author of Loitering at the Gate to Eternity. Could you pick next time when I know you're currently writing a book, next time make it just a little bit longer for me.
Actually, it's probably going to be about the same length, so you're going to have to practice up.
That's okay. As long as it all fits on the cover, you're fine.
That's basically what it comes down to.
So I guess I should start with how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing fine. And how are you doing?
Besides a little tongue-tied, I'm hanging in there fine. So we'll blame that on the rain today. We'll say that just for the sake of.
It's kind of a dreary day, yeah.
So back to the book. What made you want to put pen? Well, I doubt that you actually put pen to paper, but I guess that's the metaphor.
Keyboard to paper, yeah.
So what made you want to write the book?
It actually was an accident. Normally I do science writing, so this is a little bit far afield for me, but I happen to be married to someone who's a very gifted psychic, and I thought I would put together stories over the last 40 years for the family, and then it occurred to me after I had them written that, gee, half of his family is also psychic, so I started interviewing them, and then people started asking me, so what'd you do last summer? And I said, well, I've been writing up all these stories. And people who I didn't realize were psychic were saying, oh, well, I've had psychic experiences. Why don't you write mine up? And before I knew it, I had a book. So it kind of happened by accident.
So it kind of rolled downhill, so to speak.
Pretty much so, yes.
So when you started, obviously there had to be some people that were uncomfortable with you talking about it. I mean, even the people that have some sort of ability, how did you get past that?
Well, almost everyone in the book, except for 4 people in the back who happen to be psychic professionals, basically I only use their first names because I have school teachers and nurses and people who could lose their jobs if people found out that they were psychic. As odd as that sounds, in this day and time, people can get in a lot of trouble if they advertise that.
Yeah, I know. I've got some strange looks from people, so I know all about that too well. I mean, and I really don't hide what I do too well, but...
Well, no, it's out there.
So, as you're going through these stories, being the science writer you are, how skeptical are you of them? And as you hear more of them, I'm sure you get less skeptical of them, or am I just putting words in your mouth?
Well, actually... To back up a little bit, more than 20 years ago when I first met my husband, I was a very strong skeptic regarding anything psychic. It just struck me as superstition. And I hadn't really had a lot of firsthand experience with anything, so that was probably part of it. People are more likely to have a belief or a curiosity in it if they've actually had a brush with something psychic. But I like to say that the universe has a sense of humor, and the fellow that I met and fell in love with ended up being a gifted psychic. And furthermore, he came from a family of them, so I found myself suddenly surrounded. And it took me a while to come around because I do tend to be very analytical, but after 20 years of inexplicable experiences, I have to say that I really do think there's something to it.
Was there a moment that you started turning the page on that, or is it just over time it kind of...
I would have to say over time, but I mean, I can give you an example of like one of the first things that made me stop and think, because that happened at my father's funeral, which was, I guess, a couple of years after we were married, about 2 years. And there were two psychic events that happened at the funeral. And the first one didn't impress me that much because I'm one of those people where, well, you can tell me something, but, you know, no big deal. But there was a second thing that happened that made me really stop and say, oh, wow. But at my father's funeral, I was helping my mother with the funeral arrangements, and you don't tend to think very clearly at a time like that. And I called up the minister from the church we went to when I was growing up and asked if he could officiate. And it turns out that he was actually retired. He was in his 80s. He hadn't done anything in a long while, but his wife was so thrilled that somebody would call and ask him to do anything, she sent him out.
Of course she did. Of course she did. I know that.
Yeah, I mean, they're a sweet old couple, and you know, so I'm sitting at the funeral, and I'm sitting between my mother and my husband, and the minister says, I'd like everyone to sit down. I have a few words to say. And, you know, I had called him because I figured, well, he actually remembered who my father was, whereas, you know, somebody else might not know him. And he starts to talk, and I suddenly realized, everyone in the room suddenly realized after like a minute or two that he had kind of lost his focus, and he was kind of wandering around aimlessly in whatever he was saying. And, of course, you have to sit there and be polite. In a sense, it was a good thing because had he been a really good speaker, I would have been very upset. So the fact that he was doing something a little wacky was kind of helpful. But after about 15 minutes of this, my husband leaned over and whispered into my ear, I see your father standing next to the minister. He's tapping his foot, his arms are crossed, and he looks very impatient. And, you know, this was early in the marriage. I still wasn't like, yeah, I believe this. So I thought, well, okay, he means well, you know, but I didn't really, like, think to myself, oh, my dad's up there. So that it was kind of an event, but it didn't impress me. What impressed me was something that happened a week later. I didn't have a lot of time to socialize with people because so many people file through that, you know, they just say, oh, I'm so sorry, and you say thank you for coming, and that's about it. And a week later, my brother-in-law called, and he hadn't had a chance to talk to either one of us for a week. And he said, Louisa, I didn't want to say anything the day of the funeral, but I just want you to know that while the minister was talking, I saw your father standing up front next to him. His arms were crossed, and he was tapping his foot, and he looked very impatient. Now, he hadn't spoken to my husband, and to hear the same thing from him that my husband had said really made me stop and think. You know, I said, well, this is pretty remarkable that they would both see the same thing. So that was kind of like the first of a series of things that bombarded me over the years. And I can't say that I instantly believed in everything at that point, but that was the beginning of my saying, oh, that's really odd. There's something going on.
Yeah, I was going to say that anytime you hear a story from one person, there's always that factor. But then you hear it from somebody else and, you know,
corroborating it, essentially.
Yeah, it's like, wait a second. I heard that before, but now, wait. It does get interesting, especially, like you said, when they hadn't had an opportunity to talk. And at the end game, what's the point of, I mean, why would they put this story together as the hoax view, so to speak? You know?
Well, they wouldn't be so cruel, obviously.
Right, that's what I'm saying. There wouldn't be a
father.
Yeah.
No, they're very nice people.
Yeah, would it mix? You know, there are some times that you'd pull somebody like, you know, and then you look at the situation and you go...
But not at a funeral.
Yeah. I mean...
Yeah, so I guess that would be like the beginning of my paying attention, I guess. And it took me quite a few years before I finally said, okay, I think I really do believe there's something going on here, because I do tend to look at things analytically. One of the stories I like to tell people, and you tell me if this is going to be too long, because I don't know if you have breaks.
You have 50 minutes left. I don't take any breaks.
Oh, okay.
When I drop you off, we're done.
Okay, that's cool. Yeah, all right. One of the stories I like to tell people about the differences between how somebody who is analytical and skeptical views the world and how somebody psychic views the world is the story of how my husband and I met. Because we had, we went to the same evening, we met each other, and we both came away with something entirely different. I met my husband because I was a writer and I had been assigned to interview a psychic in the area, not him, a woman. And so, I dutifully went on that writing assignment as I would any other and asked questions, and I was writing up the article, and toward the end of the interview I get a little bit snippy and I say to her, hey, if you're psychic, then why don't you introduce me to my future husband? And she kind of smiled and she said, well, why don't you come to our psychic development class? We meet once a week. And I said, well, maybe, and I thought to myself, I don't think I'm going to, no. So I guess about a year later, I, for some reason, remembered that class, and I was kind of bored and didn't have anything to do. And I thought, well, you know what, I'll go out. What the heck? It could be kind of interesting. So I show up at her house. I mean, the big thing is she actually remembered me. That surprised me because I hadn't seen her in a year. And she welcomed me in, and I, looked around and I thought, oh, these people seem pretty normal, what I was expecting. But they all seemed like none of them were professional psychics. They were just doing this because they were interested in it. And she introduced me to a bunch of people. I don't even remember who they all were. That evening I didn't remember. But I shook all of their hands, and, everybody was very nice. And then we had the class, and it was a lot of fun. And I decided, hey, you know what? I think I'll come back because this was fun. And that was kind of the extent of the evening for me. I didn't really give much thought to anybody, and I went home. My husband was one of the people whose hands I shook. And he, after that evening, raced home and announced to his parents that he had met the woman he was going to marry. And this is odd because we hadn't really had a conversation. We'd never dated. All he did was shake my hand. He didn't even know who I was. So, in going back and asking him, well, how did you know? He explained to me, and this is something that I can relate to because it harkens to physics. It's been observed in physics, so this is not, airy-fairy. This is actually physics, that every living thing has its own unique vibrational rate, or frequency, whatever you want to call it. And some psychics, when they shake hands, can feel that. So when Stephen shakes somebody's hand, for an instant, he can feel a surge in energy while his vibrational rate adjusts to that other person's. And when he shook my hand that evening, for the first time in his life, there was no surge. We were vibrating at the same rate, and at his way of thinking, that meant we were soulmates and we were going to get married. Now, obviously, I had no idea. But about a year later, we both walked down the aisle, and that was more than 20 years ago, so I guess it worked out.
So, boy, there's a lot there that I want to talk about, but... Because, see, now, my thinking on that was it'd be backwards. Like, there would be a connection, like the pulse would, or the vibration would actually bounce. But, see, that's where I'm backwards, which I'll admit, that happens a lot. I guess that's not even really a question. That's just me admitting that I have flawed thinking. But
oh no, no flaw in your thinking. Everyone should think what they want to.
But I guess back to the actual start of the story. We were talking a little bit about this before we went on air about interviewing people, and that sometimes there's people you want to interview, and sometimes there's people you just go out of your way to interview just for the sake of having done it. So I'm going to twist this a little bit and put you right kind of on the spot. So what's the worst? Okay. What's the worst question you've ever been asked during one of these interviews? Because I know you've done dozens of them.
Oh,
See, I told you I'm going on the spot, off the beaten track.
Well, first of all, you're assuming that I have enough memory to remember what the worst question is. I don't know. I mean, I don't think I've had a worse question, but I have had hosts that have made fun of me.
Okay.
Because they, I was on a like one of those morning zoo type shows, and it was Halloween, and they were just being crazy, and I just remember thinking, wow, I don't know if I'm professional enough to handle this. What do you do?
So that I guess that'd be the worst experience. There probably was a moment in there that probably would have defined it.
Yeah, except that somebody told me one time there is no bad publicity. So I figured, well, even if they make me look like, a crazy person, it's fine because I'm still getting out there. It doesn't matter.
I thought that too, and then I heard about the LA Clippers owner and this whole story going down with him, and I thought, I don't know. I don't quite know about.
Yeah.
You always hear that there's no such thing as bad publicity, and I'm like, I'm not sure about that anymore.
You know what? I stand corrected. You're right. I guess I was thinking in terms of it's okay if you don't always come off sounding the most professional or the most sane, but it definitely does matter if you come off sounding hateful for sure.
Yeah, crazy's okay. Hateful is totally not.
Yeah, that's unacceptable. We have enough hate in the world. We don't need any more.
So, I'm jumping again. I'm sorry. I told you.
Go right ahead. You jump around.
I noted.
It was recently Easter. That seems appropriate.
You told me you're starting on a new book over the summer. So what are you writing? What's coming up next?
Well, one of the things I found when the first book came out was that a lot of people came up to me who I know and said, how come you didn't interview me for the book? I've had psychic experiences. And I went, I didn't know. I mean, I don't assume that people have them. One of the things that surprised me in writing the first book was to find out how common they were. In people I knew, people just opened up as soon as they found out. And so this book is actually just going to be, the first book is more than 100 stories from mostly everyday people about psychic experiences they've had. And this is going to be a continuation of that because there were so many people who came up to me and were almost irate that they weren't included in the first book. So, all right, I'm going to write a second book, and then you don't have to be mad at me anymore.
Yeah, well, I understand that because this morning I went through my email box and messaged everybody in there that, hey, I am booked for a while, so here's some other shows that if you want to see if they're booked, go ahead, feel free. I know that some of them aren't. They kind of fly by the seat of their pants, so rush over to them. I'm grateful that everybody wants to be on the show, but when you only do one show a week, you can imagine I get in the last week I've got 7 requests, so you kind of do the math and you go, yeah, it's not going to work out too well for me if I keep, and the number just keeps climbing as the show keeps growing. It's like,
well, it's a fun show. It's a lot of fun to listen to.
I'd love to talk to everybody, but right now with the kids being that young, I can't do more content. So it's kind of like, boy, I want, so it's like filter. And someday I'll get the process right and find the people that make it easy for myself.
So
I'm trying. That's all that matters. So
absolutely.
So I noticed you posted some blogs, and I loved some of the titles of the blogs caught my eye, which I guess that's probably a good marketing thing for you. That I'm drawn to the title of the blog. But the one that really caught my eye, and I always giggle when I see this line, but at the end of the day, I talk to mediums all the time, and why don't psychics win the lottery?
Oh, that's my blog, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's a good point because one of the things I've noticed that people say to psychics all the time is, well, how come you didn't know I was going to call? How come you didn't know this? How come you didn't know that? And so the way I reply to that is, psychics don't know anything. And if you think they do, then they've got a good scam going. Psychics get messages from either guides or specific people from the other side that they pass on. If someone doesn't pass them a message to pass on, they don't know. They have no information for you. They're just postmen. So they actually don't know anything. They just are able to pass messages on. So I think that's kind of an important thing to keep in mind, because if you're not supposed to know something, nothing's going to be handed to you through that person.
Yeah, and how... okay, so there are roughly, 6 billion people on the planet. And
6 to 7, yeah.
Yeah, okay. We're just going to use round numbers for the sake of...
We're going to use even numbers.
Yeah, even numbers. Even numbers, that's even better. So there's, we'll say, 1 million psychics. So that's a good, billion, people that we're supposed to keep track of? That's not going to happen.
Well, not only that, but, and this is my personal belief, you're right, there's 7 billion, in your case, 6 billion people on this planet, and every single one of them has free will, and what they think and say and do contributes to the future. So there isn't any one future out there. There's any number of possible futures, and we don't know which one is going to come to pass because everyone has free will. So the idea of a psychic trying to read the future for you, well, they certainly may see a future, but whether or not it's the one that comes to pass is the question. That's why you see a lot of psychics, on the assumption that they are authentic, getting it wrong. Because, sure, they may see a future, but that may not be the one that comes to pass. So I personally would not go to a psychic and ask them to predict my future. That would not be the reason to go to a psychic. I don't think anybody can accurately predict the future.
Yeah, and okay, so you go to a psychic, you pay them your money. This is always what cracks me up. And you walk outside and trip and break your arm, and they didn't tell you about that. And all that stuff goes out the window. They just told you that you were going to start flying kites and all this other stuff because you broke your arm. Because you were so excited about your future.
Some of the interesting things I've gotten, I like psychic mediums. The ones that are good, and there are some good ones out there, and a medium would be someone who is able to, communicate with the dead, as opposed to a psychic who may or may not, but he gets images. But a really good psychic medium, the value they have to offer is not predicting the future, because they really can't, but the value they have to offer is affirming that somebody that you love is still around and very actively interested in what's going on in your life. And I've had some really interesting experiences. There's a psychic medium in Long Island, not the one with the television show, a man. And we had an interesting experience with him. After my husband's mother died, they were very close. She was just a wonderful woman. But one of the things she used to always say at any of our family gatherings, because it was her sense of humor, was, and she just had a really tough life. Her father died when she was young. She ended up raising her siblings, and then she got married, and her husband was challenging. He was a bad man, but he was definitely a handful. And she used to always say, if I had to do it all over again, I wouldn't do it. Just her, blunt Italian way. And it was almost kind of like a joke whenever we were talking about anything related to marriage. She'd always go, if I had to do it over again, I wouldn't do it. So we go out to this psychic medium in Long Island, and I had bought the session for my husband to comfort him, because it's very difficult to lose a parent, particularly if you were very close to them, and she was someone who was very easy to be close to. And so we're sitting there and we're listening to this guy, and she came through and she said lots of very convincing things. Like the first thing he said was, she says hi to Anna. Well, the closest person in the world to her was Anna, her sister. And he said, and she's hanging out with some lady named Marie. Well, Marie was her best friend who died a year before. And then toward the end of the reading, he says, now she has something to say to me, and it doesn't make any sense to me, but maybe it'll make sense to you. And he had this look on his face like, I don't know what she's saying. And he says, she says if she had to do it over again, she would. And to hear that, that was just remarkable, because that was what she always said, but she changed her mind on the other side. And that was kind of remarkable for us to hear.
Yeah. I guess the big broad point is how accurate this person was doing the reading.
He's very good. Yeah, he's very good. And there are some that are very good, and there are some that really aren't. And there are also people who just overestimate their abilities. They may have a shred of psychic ability, but they get their ego involved, and then they just start doing crazy stuff.
Yeah.
But you just want somebody who doesn't think that they're all that.
Yeah,
that's when you know that you're with the wrong person.
Yeah, unfortunately, I had somebody come to me because they know I'm in. The flip side, when people know you're into this and feel comfortable coming up to talk to you about this thing, I had a woman come up to me and say, I went to this person and had a reading done. I said, well, how'd it go? And she says, I don't know. And I said, well, did they ask were they talking about the old man who smoked and this, that, and the other? And she's like, yeah, why? And I said, yeah, well, that's called cold reading. And I said, obviously...
Oh, yeah, if they're that general.
Yeah, I said, obviously, most people, if not all people, have a male figure in their life, especially older, grandpa, whatever, who smoked, who worked hard. You just start putting all these attributes together from the people, the greater generations that came before us that worked on the farms and worked with their hands, and they just want to tell you they're proud of you. And, that's the greatest sensation in the world, and obviously, by the time they get to that point, the time's up and they move on. So they were none too pleased after I did it back.
There's a lot of that too, absolutely. Yeah, and that's why I say I think it's important to, and this of course is my prejudice, but I believe it's important to always have a certain degree of skepticism. It's healthy. That doesn't mean that you have to discount everything. There are things, that we can wonder about and be intrigued by. And I think that's one of the things that makes life interesting. And I really enjoy hearing stories about things that can't be explained. They're a lot of fun.
Yeah, there's skepticism, and then you still have to believe the sky's blue. You just got to realize that some things you just have to deal with.
Yeah, I think there's a middle road. Be skeptical initially, but be willing to believe if somebody presents you with something that is pretty remarkable, and that happens.
So I want to ask you about another blog title that I caught, because this one makes me, just when I spend a lot of time with in my thoughts, when I'm not working on show stuff or family stuff, this one I always come back to, because it seems like no matter which word you put it in, which context you put it in, it makes you wonder. Because your blog title is "Can Your Thoughts Change the World?" And then me having grown up in a Christian church, and then I always ponder back to the "Can prayer," because it's just the same thing in anyways, before I get all the hate mail.
Well, yeah, or you could just say intentions.
Yeah,
intentions because a prayer is an intention, and a thought is an intention. And I do believe that, before something manifests in the physical world, you have to have it in your thoughts first. They couldn't invent the wheel without thinking about it first. So everything begins with thinking, and consequently, the way we think forms the world around us. It becomes our reality. And so I do believe that if people can change the way they think, they can change the world.
I see. This is where I agree with that, because I stopped talking about bad luck or bad things a couple years ago, and just said, hey, you know what? I'm going to come out fine on the other side of this. It's just what it is right now. And you know what? I haven't been saying that nearly as much as of late than when I started the whole, transition. Because, every day is a great experience. If you want it to be horrible, it's going to be horrible. And guess what? Tomorrow is going to be horrible, too.
Yeah. Well, everything's really how you choose. What you choose to dwell on is, I guess, what it comes down to. Because, my mother is 87 years old, and I take her out once a week, and we, have a good time. And when I take her out, she always looks around and remarks about how beautiful the trees are, or look, now they're budding, or, she looks around and she always sees something that makes her so happy. And somebody else could look around and say, oh, look at the trash on the side of the road. You know what I'm saying? It's what you choose to dwell on, and it always impresses me how positive she is.
Yeah, that's a good thing. And I wish you could bottle that up, and you'd be rich if you could sell that.
Well, I think that's why she lived to be 87, and she'll soon be 88, because she just takes joy in life.
I think you're right. I think the happier people live longer. I don't know. There's probably somebody out there that studied that somewhere along the line.
Well, certainly we know that stress will kill somebody faster than smoking cigarettes. There's a lot of studies that show how bad stress is because of the hormones it brings into the body. Your body reacts with hormones no matter whether you're feeling happy or sad. So apparently the ones that the hormones associated with depression, sadness, and anger actually can destroy the cells in your body, whereas happiness and so, you know, the chemicals that come into your system when you're in love or happy or just content have a tendency to repair cells. So that's kind of interesting.
And just a side note, who can afford to smoke? Anyway.
Well, I guess, you know, people can afford to do whatever their priority is.
They should write
if that gives somebody joy, then far be it from me to...
They should either buy your book or sponsor my show, or...
Yeah, that's right.
Or both. There we go, because I'm pretty sure... Oh, anyways.
Yeah, you know, buy the book, light a cigarette, and listen to the show, you know?
Yeah, there you go. You can
have a good time.
You can do it all.
That's right.
I guess before I wander too far, because I'm kind of wondering, anyways, that's how it's going tonight. Where can people find your book, find information about you, all that fun stuff?
Well, certainly it's available on Amazon.com. It also can be ordered through any bookstore because it's available through major distributors. Whether or not your bookstore is stocking it, I don't know. But it's quicker to get it through Amazon. And if you want information on the book before you order it, which is kind of a smart thing, you can go to the website for the book, which is www.psychicbystander.com. And I assume you went there because you're familiar with my blog.
I am, and I actually have it open in one of the tabs I've got open right now. My guest tonight is Louisa Oakley Green. Obviously, you just heard her website, thepsychicbystander.com. Go buy the book because, like I said, hey, one book isn't going to kill you. Okay.
That's a great endorsement.
Yeah, there'll probably be a banner of that floating around tomorrow. One book isn't going to kill you, says 700 authors.
I'm going to put that in my next ad, you know?
Better hurry before she gets the other book out. See, this is what I'm telling you. Buy one now, and then you're done. No. Or wait for the second one. I don't know. Anyways, you have some book signings coming up, which that's got to be exciting. Just put your name to actually in a book.
It's kind of fun because one of the things that I've learned in the book signings is that people who usually come out are already interested, obviously, in this subject, and they end up telling me amazing stories. And one I had in Connecticut, there was a woman who spoke up and she said, this is going to be the first time I've ever talked about this experience that I've had. And apparently she was in an automobile accident, and she had an experience where she went out of body and spoke to her dead grandmother and got a whole bunch of advice on life. And when she came back into her body, it took her years of rehabilitation to become functional again. But the fact that somebody would come and speak out in a crowd for the first time in their life, and she came afterward when I was signing her book, and she said, I can't tell you, it feels like there's a load off my chest because I've been wanting to share this for years, but people in my family told me I was crazy. And I looked at her and I said, you're not crazy. This happens to lots of people. It's a shame that your family isn't, you know, open enough to let you talk about it. It was a miraculous experience and quite a gift. You know, but I find that people are anxious to talk when I come somewhere and speak or just do a signing because there isn't a lot of supportive reception for what they want to talk about, and that's too bad.
Yeah, I've had a similar story where it wasn't. He's seen his life. He was probably 75 years old, and he scurried over to me at a community yard sale, and he says, I got to tell you something. He was wearing my paranormal team jacket, you know. I see my late life every day. If I told one of my kids, I'd be in the home right now, but I just had to tell somebody that I see her every day, and I'm happy to see her. And
that's so nice.
Well,
and that is a gift.
I'm happy for you because not many people get that opportunity. Enjoy it, you know. Enjoy everything. And he's like, I'm trying.
Yeah, I mean, my husband sees not on command, and he's not a professional psychic, by the way. He has a regular job, but he does see dead people from time to time. He's seen his mother a couple of times, and other people as well, as has his younger brother, and that amazes me. But I have to say that I'm very happy that I don't, because I think it would scare me.
that's the thing. I've talked to dozens of mediums, and that's the thing. There's no off. Once it starts, it's always there, and you don't know exactly when. We could be talking now, and somebody could appear and disturb your interview, and it's like, I don't know.
Well, actually, you can learn to. My husband tells me you can learn to turn it off, and that is something that psychics really need to do. Otherwise, they have no peace. But I've talked to a lot of psychics, and they do have ways of turning it off. So
I need to talk to the crowd that you're talking to. Nope.
Well, my husband could give them advice on how to do that, and the woman who wrote the forward to my book, Conchetta Bertoldi, who's a very famous psychic medium, she also told us that yes, she just tells them that no, not now.
I see. I'm going to be the obnoxious guy who's going, ha ha, right now. No. My time is important. Even though I'm timeless, my time's important.
And there may be some ghosts out there like that, although apparently most of them are, they go away if they're asked.
That's good though. I've got to see, this question's been kicking through my mind, so I'm just going to ask it. Living with your husband, I'm thinking about this psychic TV that's on TV, and she walks over to people once in a while and tells them that she has a message for them. Has your husband?
Oh, the one in Long Island, you mean?
Yes. Has your husband ever done that?
No, he doesn't. Well, it's kind of opposite. He doesn't go around telling people things because he's kind of shy. He's not like out there, In fact, after the book came out, somebody invited him to be on a television show, and he said no. But people come to him. He's had many situations where somebody would walk up to him and say, I don't know why I'm asking you this, but I'm a little bit worried, and, and he'd say, it's okay. I know you have a job interview next week. Don't worry, you've got the job. Just go. And the person would come back to him a week later and say, thank you so much. I did go and I did get the job. But he's more like a bartender, a psychic bartender. People will just come to him. So that's kind of more what it's like. But he doesn't go to people because he's a little bit too shy to do that.
I think he just pitched a new reality show, by the way, Psychic Bartender. You heard it here first. Oh.
Well, I do have a story in this called Spiritual Bartender, and it's a story about how somebody came up to him, and he's had situations several times in his life where people have come up, and he doesn't know them, and they just come up and ask for advice, and they're even wondering why.
Yeah, I can't imagine just walking up. I'm putting myself in the shoes of seeing your husband and wanting to walk over to him and say XYZ. I can't imagine just asking a random question to a random person. Of course, I do that quite often on the show, but that's kind of the deal. I just couldn't.
Well, yes, but it's socially acceptable on the show.
I guess I couldn't imagine being at the mall and saying, "See the guy over there in the red shirt? I'm just going to go ask him a question." But
yeah, well,
I probably would if I hate I don't fight the urge often. If something tells me I get that feeling I need to do it, I'd go and do it. But
yeah, well, I mean, following your intuition is probably a good thing.
Sometimes, no.
Yeah, usually. I find that when I think that I should do something, and I do it, I'm usually happy. If I think that I shouldn't do something and I do it anyway, I'm usually sorry. I should have followed my intuition. So,
bringing it kind of back around, you said you started out with writing more scientific-based stuff. Are you doing any of that? Do you miss that?
Well, actually, that's how I make my living.
Okay.
The book is the hobby.
Okay.
And how I make my living is writing about life sciences and the environment. And so I don't miss it because I do it every day. And I happen to write for recreation, which sounds crazy since I write for a living, but I started out as a journalist. I worked for newspapers, and I was also a magazine editor. And I like interviewing people and telling their stories, which is essentially what the book is. I just interviewed a bunch of people, and there's, over 100 stories in the book. And I just think I've always felt when I was a journalist early in my career that there's nothing more valuable that somebody can share with you than their life experience, because you learn so much by hearing about somebody else's life experiences without having gone through the pain. You get the advantage of that experience without paying the price for it.
Yeah, I was going to say, you're like my polar opposite, because I don't even like writing Facebook posts, and here you are just writing, 16 hours a day? No.
I love writing. I always have. I've been writing professionally since I was 17, and I just have always loved it.
So the big red pen doesn't bother you then, when the editor comes through?
Oh, no. I mean, part of being a professional writer is understanding that what you write is going to be edited, and actually I like copy editors because I feel that they make me look better. If I disagree with something, I'll chat with them, but usually they're right. I mean, they're usually editing for style, not content.
Yeah, but you have to just go poke them with the needle, even if you know they're right. You just have to sometimes. Or is that just me? That's just my personality. Go poke the bear. Just let them know you're still paying attention to them. They're not going to win everything just because they should.
Well, they'll usually win the style things. If somebody tells me take that comma out, because most writers put too many in, and things like that, I let them win those battles. The stuff that they may lose is if they change a sentence and now the meaning has changed, that type of thing.
So I'm going to ask you the typical standard half-wit radio host question, but since you mentioned you like to interview, I'm going to ask you anyways. If you could talk to one person, living or dead, who would it be?
Oh, gosh, that's a tough one. One person, living or dead. Well, it might be fun to talk to Carl Sagan. I just think he was a pretty cool guy. He was the public relations man for the science world. I like quoting him. He had a lot of very wise things to say.
Yeah, that'd be cool, especially when you spend time quoting somebody. It'd be cool to get them and actually, have those real serious direct quotes when you put your question to it, so you can actually get the answer back. Yeah. Yeah,
and he was just a fascinating and generous man, and open-minded but analytical thinker. So there were a lot of things to admire about him.
It's true. So, in the process of writing the first book into the second book, you've talked to, you said, a bunch of people. A
bunch of that would be a really specific sort of number.
Yeah, I'm not going to say all 6 billion. Close, I know, but has there been that one story or one moment that turned one to make you want to scrap the whole thing and put it on the shelf? Like you couldn't believe that you were hearing that, or however it would be.
I had one person who was a professional psychic who was an egomaniac, and I had to cut them from the book because the only people who have their first and last names in the book are the 4 professional psychics at the end. Everyone else is just first name because they didn't want people to know who they were. And consequently, I didn't feel I could put somebody in the book who I didn't have confidence in, if they were having their first and last name in. And this person was very egotistical and started doing a reading while I was trying to interview her and was completely wrong. And on top of that, in the middle of the interview, would say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I have to go. You can finish interviewing me next week," and then wouldn't show up. And then finally, I just, was like, okay, I don't think I feel good about this person. And I just sent her all her stories, and I said, "You have full copyright to these, but I have to cut them." And I left it at that. That was not when I thought that I can't go on with this book. It was a matter of I need for this book to have integrity. It's very important to me that I feel that everyone I interviewed is authentic. And if I feel like someone isn't authentic, I can't have them in the book. So that was a tough decision for me because I'm not the most aggressive person in the world. So to have to tell somebody, "Gosh, you're not going to be in my book," it was kind of difficult for me. Yeah, that's a good way to be, though. Especially, but you could have put it in there and lost. I don't want to say lost you, but you would have lost a little bit of you by succeeding and going ahead and putting them in because they had the
the professionalism behind it. So.
Yeah, this book, it was my first book, and I felt that it represented me on some level, and honesty and authenticity is very important to me, so that had to be in the book.
So I'm going to ask you a question I didn't take the time to look up. Are you self-published, or are you through a company?
I am published through iUniverse.
Yeah, is there one reason or another that you went that way or over the other?
Yeah. I could have gone with a regular publisher, but I felt like I would have more control over the book. I'm a professional writer, and I feel that, obviously I hired a professional copy editor to look at my book as well, but I felt that I was capable of writing the book without a ton of marketing and assistance. Because a lot of times when somebody comes through and tries to market your book, they'll pour it into a mold so that it's exactly like every other book that's out there. And one of the biggest compliments I've gotten from people is, hey, I really like the way you organized your book. I really like the way you put it together. And, whenever somebody says something like that, I feel like, well, good, because I didn't do it the way they, I actually, the marketing team at the publisher that published it, except I get the final word, said, oh, you really ought to do it this way to market it. And I said, I understand what you're saying, but I don't want it to be, I don't know how to put it, formula.
Yeah.
I want people's stories to be as they told me without any changes. This is what they told me. I'm not going to add details that weren't there to make it sound more saccharine or whatever.
And then the demon walked in the room. No.
But I guess the publisher I went to is halfway between a major publisher and self-publishing, because they have an editorial staff that work with you all the way through. And that really helped me a lot because I had some format to learn in books. The fact that you're a professional writer doesn't necessarily mean you understand the format of books, and my editorial consultant really educated me on that, and that was wonderful to have.
I know that most of my listeners went, oh, here he goes again with these tedious questions about writing a book. He says he's going to write one, and when he probably turns 70, somebody also write one for him, and he'll put his name on it and say it's his. But I like the nuts and bolts, because we were talking before we got on air about producing my own show. So there's little nuances with that, and I like hearing the backstory, because there's that human element that you have to have such a level of passion to write the book, put it together, and then put it out there. I mean, it's one thing to write a book.
Well, it's fun. To me, this is my hobby. Like doing writing that is, obviously you don't make a lot of money on a book unless you're Stephen King or something. If I had a little more sex and violence, maybe I could have made some money. But this is more my hobby. I just really enjoy doing this type of writing. So, it's fun for me. Some people find writing very painful, but I just love it.
Yeah, you're talking to somebody that finds writing painful. Thanks for bringing that up. No, but that's the thing. We're very similar in this type of person. I enjoy doing the show, and truthfully, as long as someone listens and someone enjoys it, I know I'm not getting rich off of it. So I enjoy the conversations. I enjoy the digging into the people, finding
Absolutely.
The right people. It's the process.
It's creative. It's a creative expression.
And
that's very satisfying.
It's getting close now. It used to be I used to really enjoy the process more than doing the show, but now I'm getting to the point where I enjoy doing the show, feel comfortable with myself. The nerves aren't horrific anymore, but I love digging. I love doing the research. I love taking the time to get to know somebody before I hear their voice, or try to get to know somebody. There's always those few people that they say hello and you go.
With this book.
They go hello and you go, who are you? So at the end of the day, when you sit down to read a book, who are you reading?
Oh gosh, I have very eclectic tastes. I can give you like
Throw a few
4 or 5
books
I've read, and you'll see how different my tastes are. One book I read was the autobiography of the Dalai Lama's mother, which I thought was great. It was fascinating to read. Because everybody reads the Dalai Lama's books, but how about his mom?
I never even crossed my mind, but okay, see.
It's a great book. And then I read an antiquarian book called 50 Years at Sea, and it was the memoirs of a ship's captain from the late 1800s into the 1930s when the steamships came in. And I liked that because it was so interesting to get a window into what life was like at that time, late 1800s into the early 1900s. And then I'm also reading fiction. Of course, like everybody else, I'm on the 5th book of Game of Thrones. I haven't seen the television show because we don't have HBO, but it's a book that's extremely well written. But I hate the values in the book or lack of values. It's just awful. People say it's a fascinating read, but no one would want to live in that world. So that's kind of interesting as well.
But it gives you that perspective of seeing that world. Even if it's through your mind.
Well, it's a very ruthless world, and it probably reflects very accurately, the challenges of trying to stay in power. I'm thinking like throughout the ages in Europe, all the different people who were trying to hold the throne of a country and what would happen to them. And so from that standpoint, it seems pretty accurate how ruthless they were. If you read the history of almost any country, you read this sort of stuff.
Yeah, some of the stuff's just gruesome, which you read about, and yeah. Anyways.
Oh yeah, I mean, read the history of Constantinople, and oh my God, everybody was murdering everyone else so that they would be the next in line. It was pretty crazy. And then if they wanted to really get rid of somebody, they had this thing where they would cut somebody's nose off, and then they couldn't possibly be the king because you had to have a nice-looking face to be the king. You couldn't be deformed. And it was just like crazy stuff.
Well, I guess that solves the death problem. You just have to cut somebody's nose off.
Yeah, well, yeah, they did both. There was a lot of poisoning going on.
And I guess that's where that old phrase, the cut your nose off in spite of your face saying comes from.
Maybe it is.
I bet you somewhere in there it comes from. Okay, well, we're running out of time. So give me your website, give me all, just give me that big blurb that you know so well how to sell yourself. I don't have to tell you what to do.
Sure. All right. The book is Loitering at the Gate to Eternity, Memoirs of a Psychic Bystander. See, it's an even longer title than you thought. And you can get information about it at www.psychicbystander.com. And the book is essentially more than 100 stories of everyday people's psychic experiences, from dreams that predict the future to contact with the dead, reincarnation, and a bunch of other things. It's an easy read and a lot of fun.
Well, thank you for being on. Thank you for being patient with me tonight and going all over the place with me.
I had a great time. It was a nice conversation.
Well, thank you, and be well, and let me know when the second book is all done and we're getting close to being done so I can get you slotted out far enough so we can talk about it some more.
I will definitely let you know.
All right. Have a good night. I'm going to hang up on you now because that's just the nature of the beast.
Well, if that's the way you're going to be.
That's the way I've got to be. All right. That was Louisa Oakley Green, author of Loitering at the Gate to Eternity. Okay. Before I forget what's to this. Spectrum Light, the best IR boosters available, according to this. Significant light gain. Just I've seen pictures, and it is amazing the light gain these products can offer you. SpectrumState.com. Or follow them on Twitter at AU Paranormal. Follow them, tell you heard them on the Malliard Report. That is the best way to be. Go ahead, mention them to them. You go check out the products, and if they're not interested to you, just tell them you heard them here anyways. That way, they know that the ad's working. They already know the ad's working, but they like hearing it more. I like seeing it more. It's all good. Advertisers like that stuff, gang. Truthfully. They like knowing that people are at least observing, trying to find out what the products are about. Okay. Enough about that for right now. I want to talk to you. I did an interview with Wes Forsythe Sunday night. I guess it was an interview. Guest spot, whatever you want to call it, where I got to talk about paranormal standards for a few minutes with a person that is pro-paranormal unity. And the interview, the part that I was on, I felt that I think people don't understand where I'm coming from with paranormal standards, so I'm going to take a minute and a half here and talk to you about that, because I really don't talk about it here that much. I know it causes big drops in my listener numbers when I talked about when I did the full hour on it. But here's the bottom line. I'm not telling people how they have to investigate, what kind of equipment they have to use, or any of that stuff. I'm just telling you that maybe we should have some general standards that says, hey, maybe we shouldn't burn the place down. Maybe we shouldn't trespass. Maybe we should respect the dead. In hopes that, that we can start to form the funnel. Every team I come across nowadays, we're scientifically based. No, not so much. You don't have this process that I'm trying to get you to, and when I start talking to you about your process or your standards, you kind of roll your eyes and go blah, blah, blah on me. You don't really have it together yet, so I want you to get it together. You want to say something? You want to hate me for saying that you should have it together? That's fine. Hate me. I don't really care. At the end of the day, I'm glad that you hate me, because that means at least you took the time to think about what I had to say. So review what you're doing, and just know that at the end of the day, I'm just trying to inch everybody forward out of the TV genre of things. It's been so simple to pick up a TV show, and so that's how I want to investigate and run out and do it. Well, gang, it's 2014. The TV shows are almost over. It's time to realize that most of the investigators are going to go away, but the ones that are left are going to have a better level of accountability, a better standard for today and tomorrow, pushing forward towards whatever science they want to put towards it. That's this week's Malliard Report. Have a good night.
Before we flip that on-air sign to the off position, a quick reminder. For all things about the report, previews, and reviews, go to italkparanormal.com.
Get connected with Take Two Radio on Facebook or Twitter at Take Two Radio. For email updates on future shows, follow at Blog Talk Radio. For previous episodes, upcoming guests, and more, visit take2radio.com.